The lights inside Vancouver's Rogers Arena didn't just dim on this cold November night. They died completely, plunging 20,000 screaming fans into absolute darkness. What followed wasn't just an entrance. What followed was a warning shot fired across the bow of professional wrestling itself. Because when Brock Lesnar's music hit, when that unmistakable roar of "Here comes the pain" exploded through the sound system, every single person in that building knew something catastrophic was about to unfold. The beast incarnate had returned, and blood was on the menu. But here's the question that nobody could answer in those initial seconds of pandemonium. Why now? Why this match? Why CM Punk? The pyrotechnics erupted in violent bursts of white flame, and there he stood at the top of the ramp, Brock Lesnar, all 286 pounds of pure, condensed violence, his chest heaving, his eyes locked on the twin steel cages that housed WarGames. Paul Heyman stood beside him, microphone already in hand, that serpentine smile spreading across his face like he knew the punchline to a joke the rest of us hadn't even heard yet. The advocate of destruction. The prophet of pain. And tonight, he was about to deliver a sermon that would shake the foundation of Survivor Series itself. Lesnar's entrance wasn't theatrical, it was predatory. Each step down that ramp carried the weight of inevitability, the kind of presence that makes grown men check their exits and women clutch their seats. This wasn't sports entertainment. This was something primal crawling out of the evolutionary darkness, and it wore Brock Lesnar's face. The beast moved with purpose, his gaze never wavering from those twin steel structures, and if you looked closely enough, you could see it, the hunger, the anticipation, the absolute certainty that before this night ended, someone would be broken beyond repair. Heyman stopped at ringside, bringing the microphone to his lips with all the ceremony of a judge reading a death sentence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice dripping with theatrical venom, "my name is Paul Heyman, and I am the advocate for the one, the only, the reigning, defending, undisputed destroyer of the WWE, Brock Lesnar." The crowd's response was split perfectly down the middle, half erupting in cheers for the return of legitimate dominance, half booing the specter of destruction that had haunted their heroes for over 2 decades. But Heyman wasn't finished. Oh no, he was just getting started. "Tonight, you will witness something that will be replayed for generations. Tonight, you will see why CM Punk's so-called return to glory was nothing but a fantasy, a delusion, a pathetic fairy tale told by a man who forgot one simple truth." Heyman paused, letting the tension build like a conductor holding his orchestra on the edge of crescendo. "In this business, there are workers, and then there is Brock Lesnar." The camera cut to the locker room area where CM Punk sat, hands wrapped, face stoic, watching Lesnar's entrance on the monitor. The straight-edge superstar's jaw tightened. Whatever history these two men shared, whatever bad blood had been simmering beneath the surface of professional courtesy, it was about to boil over in the most violent manner possible. Punk's eyes didn't show fear. They showed calculation, determination, and something else. Something darker. Was it revenge? Was it vindication? Or was it the desperate hope of a man who knew he was walking into the lion's den with nothing but his fists and his pride? Back in the arena, Lesnar had climbed into the ring, bouncing on the balls of his feet, loosening his shoulders with the casual confidence of an apex predator surveying its territory. The WarGames structure loomed above him, 2 rings side by side, encased in steel mesh that had seen more blood than a slaughterhouse floor. This wasn't going to be a match. This was going to be a massacre, and everyone in that building could feel it in their bones. The production crew cut to a video package, but this wasn't your standard highlight reel. This was a psychological warfare masterpiece, chronicling every slight, every verbal jab, every moment of tension between Punk and Lesnar over the past 6 months. It started innocently enough. Punk's triumphant return to WWE after his lengthy absence, the media tours, the interviews where he proclaimed himself the best in the world, the sold-out shows, the merchandise flying off the shelves. The prodigal son had returned, and the WWE Universe had welcomed him with open arms. But then came the comments, the subtle digs, the not-so-subtle insinuations that Brock Lesnar was nothing more than a part-timer, a mercenary who showed up when the checks were big enough and disappeared when the work got hard. Punk, ever the provocateur, had poked the bear. He'd done it on podcasts, on social media, in backstage interviews. He'd questioned Lesnar's passion, his commitment, his very right to be called a WWE superstar when he only appeared a handful of times per year. And Brock Lesnar? The beast incarnate had remained silent. Ominously, dangerously silent. Until 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, CM Punk stood in the center of the ring on Monday Night Raw, microphone in hand, delivering one of his trademark promos about respect, about earning your place, about showing up every single night to entertain the fans who paid their hard-earned money. He was on fire, the crowd eating out of his hand, building toward what everyone assumed would be a challenge to the current champion. But he never got there. Because that's when Lesnar's music hit. The beast didn't run to the ring. He didn't rush. He walked with that same predatory purpose, climbed through the ropes, and stood face-to-face with CM Punk in the center of the ring. The microphone in Punk's hand suddenly seemed very small, very inadequate. Heyman did all the talking, informing Punk that his campaign of disrespect had finally crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, that his mouth had written checks his ass couldn't cash, and that at Survivor Series, inside the WarGames structure, Brock Lesnar would remind the entire world what happened when you confused a microphone for a weapon. Punk, to his credit, didn't back down. He'd stood toe-to-toe with the beast, looked him dead in the eyes, and accepted the challenge with a simple, defiant statement. I've fought guys bigger than you. I've beaten guys tougher than you. And at Survivor Series, I'm going to prove that all the muscles and all the hype in the world don't mean a damn thing when you step into the ring with the best in the world. The video package ended with a split-screen image, Lesnar's cold, calculating stare on one side, Punk's defiant smirk on the other. The question hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Could CM Punk's technical mastery and psychological warfare overcome Brock Lesnar's raw, unbridled power? Or was this going to be exactly what it looked like, a lamb volunteering for slaughter? The arena lights came back up, and the crowd was at a fever pitch. The WarGame structure began its slow, mechanical descent from the ceiling, the steel mesh catching the arena lights and casting shadows that looked like prison bars across the canvas. This was it. The moment of truth. The point of no return. But before CM Punk could make his entrance, before the bell could ring, before this violent chapter could be written, something happened that nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, saw coming. The Titantron flickered to life, and a face appeared that sent shockwaves through the arena. A face that had been absent from WWE programming for over 3 years. A face that represented chaos, unpredictability, and the complete obliteration of the established order. Seth Rollins. But this wasn't the Seth Rollins fans remembered. His hair was darker, his eyes harder, and his smile, that unsettling, unhinged smile, suggested that something fundamental had broken and been rebuilt wrong. He sat in what appeared to be a concrete room, the camera close enough to see every scar, every line of exhaustion, every hint of madness that had crept into his features during his time away. Brock, Rollins began, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of a threat. Did you really think you could just walk back into MY House and destroy MY Legacy without consequences? Did you think I forgot what you did? Did you think I forgave? Lesnar's expression didn't change, but his body language shifted, just slightly, just enough for those paying attention to notice. Heyman's eyes went wide, his usual confidence cracking like ice under pressure. CM Punk isn't your problem tonight, Rollins continued, leaning forward until his face filled the entire screen. I am. And I brought friends. The feed cut to black, and then chaos erupted. The lights went out again, but this time when they came back up, the ring was surrounded. Not by security, not by referees, but by 6 men in black tactical gear, faces obscured by masks, each carrying steel chairs. They moved with military precision, sliding into the ring from all sides, forming a circle around Brock Lesnar. The beast didn't panic. He never panicked. But even he couldn't fight 7 men simultaneously, and he knew it. Heyman scrambled out of the ring, screaming for help, for security, for anyone, but his pleas were drowned out by the roar of the crowd, half in shock, half in absolute exhilaration at the unexpected chaos. And then, emerging from the crowd, climbing over the barricade with the casual confidence of a man who knew he'd already won, came Seth Rollins. He was dressed in his ring gear, but something about him was different. He moved like a man possessed, like someone who'd spent 3 years in exile planning this exact moment, refining it, perfecting it until it could be executed with surgical precision. Lesnar charged at the nearest masked figure, taking him down with a clothesline that could decapitate a lesser man, but 3 more were on him immediately, driving steel chairs into his back, his ribs, his legs. The beast fought like a cornered animal, but even monsters can be overwhelmed by numbers. Even titans can fall. Rollins circled the carnage, conducting it like a symphony of violence, and when Lesnar finally dropped to one knee, when the weight of 7 men became too much even for his legendary strength, Rollins struck. The stomp came out of nowhere, driving Lesnar's face into the canvas with such force that the entire ring shook. But here's where it gets truly diabolical. Here's where the night went from shocking to absolutely unprecedented. As Lesnar lay motionless in the center of the ring, as the crowd stood in stunned silence trying to process what they'd just witnessed, the Titantron flickered to life again. And this time, the face that appeared made the previous shock seem quaint by comparison. Vince McMahon. Not Triple H. Not any current WWE official. But the man himself, the architect of WWE's empire, supposedly retired and out of the picture for good. His expression was grave, his voice carrying the weight of someone who just watched his carefully constructed world begin to crumble. "Ladies and gentlemen," McMahon began, and you could hear a pin drop in that arena. "What you're witnessing tonight is not sanctioned, not approved, and not part of any WWE programming. Seth Rollins is acting without authorization, and as of this moment, he is..." But McMahon never finished that sentence, because the feed cut to static, replaced immediately by another face. A face half obscured by shadows, but unmistakable nonetheless. Triple H. And he was smiling. "Vince," Hunter said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge, "you don't run this company anymore." "I do." "And Seth?" "Seth's been on my payroll for 6 months. Everything you just saw, that was Act 1. The Titantron went black, and the arena exploded into absolute pandemonium. Fans were on their feet, phones out, social media erupting in real time as the wrestling world tried to process the nuclear bomb that had just been dropped. Brock Lesnar, the unstoppable beast incarnate, laid out in the center of the ring. Seth Rollins revealed as a corporate mercenary. Triple H apparently orchestrating a coup against his own father-in-law's legacy. And CM Punk. Where the hell was CM Punk? The answer to that question came exactly 90 seconds later, right at the 60-second mark that would become this event's most talked-about cliffhanger, when CM Punk's entrance music, Cult of Personality, by Living Colour, finally hit the sound system. But Punk didn't appear at the top of the ramp. He didn't emerge from backstage with his usual confident swagger. Instead, the camera found him already in the gorilla position, being physically restrained by 4 security guards as he watched the carnage in the ring on the monitor. His face told the entire story: rage, confusion, betrayal, and underneath it all, the dawning realization that he'd been played. This whole thing, this entire setup had never been about Brock Lesnar versus CM Punk. That match was just window dressing, just the lure to get both men in position for whatever twisted game Triple H and Seth Rollins were actually playing. Punk shoved the security guards off with a violence that suggested his legendary temper was about to override his strategic mind. He stormed toward the curtain, and that's when the camera cut back to the ring, where Seth Rollins stood over Lesnar's prone body with a microphone, that unhinged smile growing wider by the second. "CM Punk," Rollins called out, his voice echoing through the arena like a villain's monologue. "I know you're back there. I know you're watching. And I know you're confused. So let me make this crystal clear for you, and for everyone watching around the world." The crowd was eating this up, chanting, "This is awesome," with the kind of fervor usually reserved for 5-star classics, not corporate conspiracies and hostile takeovers. But this was 2025, and the lines between reality and fiction had never been blurrier in professional wrestling. "This isn't about you," Rollins continued, pacing around Lesnar like a shark circling wounded prey. "This was never about you. You're just collateral damage. A side quest. A warm-up act." He paused, letting that verbal slap echo through the building. "You spent months running your mouth about Brock, about part-timers, about respect, and earning your place. And you were right about one thing. Brock Lesnar doesn't deserve to be here. But neither do you." That statement landed like a grenade in a nursery. The crowd's cheers turned to boos, the energy shifting from excitement to genuine heat. Punk had been one of the most beloved returns in recent memory. His comeback tore a genuine feel-good story in an industry that specialized in disappointment. And now Seth Rollins was standing there, backed by Triple H's apparent authority, calling him irrelevant? "You're a relic, Punk." Rollins drove the point home with surgical precision. A nostalgia act. A greatest hits compilation that nobody asked for. You came back thinking this was still your house, that you could still cut your little promos and everyone would bow down to the cult of your personality. But this isn't 2011 anymore. This isn't even 2014. This is 2025, and the wrestling world has moved on without you. The camera cut backstage just in time to catch CM Punk finally breaking free from the security detail. He sprinted toward the stage entrance, but before he could reach it, two of Rollins' masked associates stepped into his path. Punk didn't hesitate. He took them both down with a double clothesline, fought through the grabbing hands, and burst through the curtain onto the stage. The crowd erupted. This was what they'd paid to see. Not corporate intrigue, not mysterious conspiracies, but CM Punk in fighting mode, ready to take on an army if that's what it took to get his hands on Seth Rollins. He stood at the top of the ramp, chest heaving, eyes locked on the ring, and for a moment, just a moment, it looked like we were about to get the fight of the century. But Rollins just laughed. That's all he did. He threw his head back and laughed like a man who'd already won a game the opponent didn't even know they were playing. "Come on down, Punk," Rollins invited, spreading his arms wide. "Please. I'm begging you. Walk into this ring. Step into this WarGames structure. Because the second you do, the second you put one foot on these steel steps, you're going to understand exactly what kind of trap you've been lured into." Punk hesitated. Not out of fear. CM Punk had never been afraid of a fight in his life, but out of tactical awareness. His eyes scanned the ringside area, counting the masked figures, measuring distances, calculating odds. And then he looked at Brock Lesnar's motionless body, at the way the beast hadn't moved since taking that stomp, and something clicked in his mind. This was about more than Seth Rollins getting revenge. This was about sending a message, about establishing a new order, about proving that the era of individual star power was over, replaced by something more organized, more ruthless, more willing to burn the entire house down, if that's what it took to rebuild it in their image. Punk grabbed a microphone from a nearby stagehand, bringing it to his lips with the kind of controlled fury that had made him one of the most compelling talkers in wrestling history. "You want to know what I think, Seth?" His voice was quiet, dangerous, the kind of calm that comes before volcanic eruptions. "I think you're scared. I think you spent 3 years away from this business, nursing your wounds, making your plans, and you realized that you couldn't beat me straight up. You couldn't beat Brock straight up. So you did what cowards always do. You stacked the deck, you brought backup, and you convinced yourself that winning dirty still counts as winning." The crowd roared its approval, chanting CM Punk, CM Punk, with religious fervor. "But here's the thing about traps, Seth," Punk continued, starting his walk down the ramp with measured steps. "They only work if the prey is stupid enough to walk into them. And I didn't claw my way back to WWE after everything I went through, after every bridge I burned and every door I slammed shut, just to get taken out by a bargain basement architect and his mall cop security team." Rollins' smile faltered just slightly, just enough to show that Punk's words had found their mark. "So here's what's going to happen," Punk said, now standing at ringside, separated from the ring by only the WarGames structure. "You're going to let Brock Lesnar walk out of that ring. You're going to send your little masked minions back to whatever hot topic they came from. And then you and I are going to settle this the way it should have been settled from the beginning. One-on-one, no interference, no corporate backing, no Triple H pulling strings from behind the curtain. Just you, me, and the truth about who's really the best in the world. The challenge hung in the air like smoke after gunfire, and for a moment, it looked like Rollins might actually accept. His expression shifted, the unhinged smile fading into something more genuine, more dangerous. He looked at his associates, seemed to consider the proposition, and then the lights went out again. When they came back up 3 seconds later, the ring was empty. Completely empty. Brock Lesnar, Seth Rollins, all 6 masked figures gone. Vanished as if they'd never been there in the first place. Only the crumpled steel chairs and the imprint of Lesnar's body on the canvas remained as evidence that any of it had actually happened. CM Punk stood at ringside, spinning in circles, trying to process what he was seeing. The crowd was in absolute chaos, some laughing at the absurdity, others booing the apparent cop-out, still others recording everything on their phones because they knew they were witnessing something that would be dissected and analyzed for years to come. And then, as if this night hadn't already delivered enough insanity, the Titantron flickered to life one more time. But this wasn't Triple H. This wasn't Seth Rollins. This wasn't even Vince McMahon. It was Brock Lesnar. He was in what appeared to be a medical facility, being attended to by doctors, but his eyes were open and locked directly on the camera. His face was bloodied, his body clearly in pain, but when he spoke, his voice carried that same terrifying certainty that had defined his entire career. "Punk," Lesnar said, the single word carrying more threat than a 1,000-word promo from anyone else. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot. You think Seth Rollins is your problem? You think Triple H's little power play matters? None of that means a damn thing, because at the end of the night, at the end of this war, you and I still have business to settle. And when we do, when I get my hands on you without interference, without distractions, without anything standing between us, I'm going to remind you why they call me the Beast Incarnate." The feed cut before Punk could respond, leaving him standing alone in the arena, surrounded by 20,000 fans who didn't know whether to cheer, boo, or just sit in stunned silence. The WarGames structure hung above the ring like a steel specter, empty and waiting, a promise of violence yet to come. Because here's the thing about promises in professional wrestling, they're always kept, just never in the way you expect. The referee, who'd been standing in the corner this entire time looking as confused as everyone else, approached Punk cautiously. "What do you want to do?" he asked, his voice barely picked up by the camera. "Do we have a match? Is this still happening?" Punk looked at the empty ring, then at the WarGames structure, then out at the crowd. And in that moment, you could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. He could walk away. He could refuse to participate in whatever twisted game this had become. He could take his ball and go home, protecting his legacy and his body from whatever additional chaos the night had in store. But CM Punk had never taken the easy way out in his life. And he sure as hell wasn't going to start now. "Yeah," he said, loud enough for the microphone to catch, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We have a match. Ring the bell." The referee looked skeptical, but he signaled to the timekeeper anyway. The bell rang, echoing through the confused silence of the arena, officially starting a WarGames match with only one competitor present. It was absurd. It was unprecedented. The match's brutality escalated with each passing minute. Bodies crashed through tables that had been set up in the corners. The canvas was stained with blood from at least 4 different competitors. The steel mesh actually bent in places from the impact of thrown bodies, something the structure's designers had claimed was impossible. This was WarGames living up to its apocalyptic promise, delivering exactly the kind of barbaric spectacle that its history demanded. When Brock Lesnar's music finally hit for his official entrance, the building somehow got even louder. The Beast Incarnate, despite the beating he'd taken earlier, despite the obvious pain in his movements, entered that cage like a man on a mission from God to remind everyone why he was called the most dangerous man in WWE. He went straight for Owens, hitting 3 consecutive German suplexes that left the former Universal Champion a crumpled heap in the corner. But it was the final entrant that nobody saw coming. the one that would shift this entire narrative into its climactic third act. Seth Rollins himself, no longer in tactical gear but in full wrestling attire, his entrance accompanied by new music that sounded like a funeral dirge mixed with industrial metal. He stood at the top of the ramp for a moment, surveying the carnage he'd orchestrated, and then he did something completely unexpected. He unlocked the cage door and invited someone else to enter first. Triple H stepped through that door in wrestling gear for the first time in over 2 years, and the building exploded into absolute pandemonium. The Game, the cerebral assassin, the man who'd been pulling the strings all along, was getting his hands dirty in the literal sense. And his first target wasn't Punk or Rhodes or even Lesnar. It was Orton, his former Evolution partner, his brother-in-arms who'd apparently chosen the wrong side of this corporate civil war. The match that followed was pure chaos in the best possible way. All 8 men, later joined by the 2 remaining masked associates who revealed themselves as Austin Theory and Grayson Waller, created a tapestry of violence that would be studied in wrestling schools for years. The action moved between both rings, using every inch of the WarGames structure, creating moments of breathtaking athleticism punctuated by sickening brutality. The climax built through a series of escalating near finishes. Punk hit Rollins with a go-to-sleep that should have ended anyone's night, but Triple H broke up the pin with a sledgehammer shot that somehow the referee missed. Lesnar hit an F5 on Owens from the top rope that created a crater in the canvas, but Waller's interference prevented the count. Rhodes attempted his Crossroads finisher on Triple H himself, but Theory pulled the referee out of the ring at the crucial moment. And that's when everything came to a head in the way only professional wrestling can deliver. CM Punk and Brock Lesnar, the 2 men this entire event had been built around, found themselves alone in one ring while chaos continued in the other. They stood face to face, bloodied and exhausted, finally getting the confrontation that had been promised. And for 30 seconds, they just exchanged strikes. No finesse, no technical mastery, just pure hatred condensed into fists and elbows and forearms. Lesnar hit a spine-buster that shook both rings. Punk responded with a desperate GTS that Lesnar somehow, impossibly, caught mid-motion, transitioning immediately into an F5. But Punk twisted in midair, landing on his feet through sheer force of will, and hit a second GTS that connected flush with Lesnar's jaw. Both men collapsed. The referee began his count, and it became clear that whoever got up first would likely determine not just this match, but the entire direction of WWE's immediate future. The crowd counted along, the tension unbearable, as both competitors struggled to their hands and knees. 8-9. Lesnar's hand reached for the ropes. Punk's body tensed to push upward. And that's when Seth Rollins, having dispatched Orton in the other ring, delivered a stomp to both men simultaneously by positioning them perfectly and leaping between rings. It was physically impossible and absolutely spectacular, the kind of visual that would dominate highlight reels for decades. Rollins made the cover on Punk, hooking both legs, and the referee counted. 1, 2, 3. The bell rang, Rollins' music hit, and Triple H entered the ring to raise his protégé's hand in victory. The masked associates surrounded them in a protective circle, and for a moment, it looked like the new order had truly established itself through dominance and brutality. But wrestling stories don't end with a heel standing tall. They end with the promise of retribution. As Rollins and his faction celebrated, as medical personnel attended to the fallen competitors, a single image appeared on the Titantron that made even the victors pause. It was Cody Rhodes, standing in the backstage area, bloodied but unbowed, with his arm around CM Punk's shoulders. Randy Orton stood on Punk's other side. And standing behind all 3, his presence as intimidating as ever despite his loss, was Brock Lesnar. Cody brought a microphone to his lips, his voice hoarse but determined. Seth, Hunter, enjoy this moment. Celebrate your victory. Because in 3 weeks at the Royal Rumble, we're going to settle this the right way. And this time, there won't be any masks to hide behind, any corporate protection to save you. Just us, and the truth about who really runs this business. The final shot of the broadcast was a split screen, Rollins and Triple H in the ring, championship gold being brought out to commemorate their faction's dominance, and the four faces who deposed them, united not by friendship, but by the common goal of tearing down the regime that had humiliated them. The question wasn't whether there would be a rematch. The question was whether WWE itself would survive the war that was clearly just beginning. The commentary team signed off with a simple statement that captured the night's insanity perfectly. Ladies and gentlemen, what you witnessed tonight was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of a revolution. And God help us all for what comes next. The screen faded to black, but the conversation was just beginning. Social media exploded with reactions, theories, and frame-by-frame analysis of every twist and turn. Did Triple H actually orchestrate everything from the beginning? Was Brock Lesnar's apparent alignment with Punk and Rhodes genuine or just strategic? Who else might join either side in this corporate civil war? And most importantly, had CM Punk finally found worthy adversaries in his quest to prove he was still the best in the world, or had he bitten off more than even his legendary determination could chew? Survivor Series 2025 would be remembered not for answering questions, but for asking them. Not for providing closure, but for ripping open new wounds. And certainly not for giving fans the simple, straightforward conclusion they'd expected when they tuned in to watch Brock Lesnar destroy CM Punk. Instead, they got something far more valuable in the modern wrestling landscape: genuine unpredictability wrapped in visceral violence, with consequences that would echo for months to come. The Beast had indeed destroyed CM Punk, but in doing so, he'd helped create something potentially more dangerous: a unified resistance against the very authority that had enabled his dominance for so long. And that, perhaps, was the real story all along. It was absolutely insane. It was perfect. Punk climbed through the ropes and stood in the center of the ring, arms spread wide, inviting whoever wanted to fight to come and get some. The crowd was chanting his name, feeding off his defiance, his refusal to be intimidated or manipulated. This was the CM Punk they remembered, the rebel who'd hijacked WWE programming with a microphone and the truth, the voice of the voiceless who'd never met an authority figure he couldn't antagonize. 60 seconds passed. Then 90. Then 2 full minutes with Punk standing alone in the ring, daring the universe to throw something else at him. The crowd's chants grew louder, more insistent, building to a crescendo that threatened to blow the roof off Rogers Arena. And that's when the real twist hit. The WarGames structure's door, which had been locked shut, suddenly clicked open. Just the sound of it, amplified through the sound system, was enough to make everyone freeze. Punk turned toward the door, his body tensing, ready for another wave of masked attackers, another surprise assault, another level to this increasingly complex game. But what emerged from that door wasn't Seth Rollins. It wasn't more masked associates. It wasn't Brock Lesnar seeking immediate revenge. It was Cody Rhodes. The American Nightmare walked through that door like he owned the place, dressed in street clothes. No entrance music, no pyrotechnics, just pure presence. The crowd exploded, not in cheers or boos, but in confused excitement, because nobody had predicted this. Nobody had seen Cody Rhodes' name anywhere near the Survivor Series card. He'd been advertised for a completely different event on the other side of the country. Punk's expression shifted through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, suspicion, calculation, and finally, guarded recognition. These two men had history, not all of it pleasant, and their reunion in the center of a WarGames ring under these bizarre circumstances carried the weight of unfinished business. Cody raised his hands in a gesture of peace, stopping about 10 feet from Punk. "Before you hit me," he started, and despite the chaos of the night, the crowd laughed. "I'm not here to fight you. I'm here because Triple H called me 3 hours ago and told me I needed to get on a plane if I wanted to save this company from eating itself alive." Punk didn't lower his guard. "And I'm supposed to trust you because unlike Seth Rollins, unlike whatever corporate coup we just witnessed, I actually give a damn about WWE." Cody shot back, his voice carrying genuine emotion. "I didn't scratch and claw my way back here, finish my father's story, just to watch it all burn down because Hunter decided to play Game of Thrones with real people's careers." The two men stared at each other, the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. And then, slowly, Punk extended his hand. Cody looked at Punk's face searching for any hint of deception, and then clasped it firmly. The crowd erupted in approval, because whatever else was happening, whatever conspiracy was unfolding, at least these two legends were on the same page. But as their hands met, as the cameras captured what should have been a moment of unity, the Titantron blazed to life one final time. And what appeared on that screen would set up the most shocking conclusion to a WWE event in modern history. It was a split screen. On the left, Seth Rollins and his masked associates, standing in what appeared to be the bowels of the arena. On the right, Brock Lesnar, now standing despite his injuries, flanked by Paul Heyman and three figures in business suits that nobody recognized. Both sides spoke simultaneously. WarGames isn't over. What followed in the next 17 minutes wasn't just a wrestling match. It was controlled chaos given form, a symphony of violence conducted by 8 of the most talented and dangerous performers in the industry. Because that's what this had been building toward all along, not Brock versus Punk in isolation, but two teams representing two different visions for WWE's future, colliding in the most unforgiving structure professional wrestling had ever devised. The actual WarGames match began with Cody Rhodes and CM Punk on one side, facing off against two of Rollins' masked associates in the initial phase. The rules were explained in rapid fire by the commentary team, 5-minute intervals, alternating team members entering, the match only beginning in earnest when all participants were inside the cage. It was a format designed to create drama, to build tension, to give the illusion of hope before snatching it away. Punk and Rhodes worked with surprising chemistry for two men who'd spent years on opposite sides of wrestling's various political divides. They isolated the first masked associate, working quick tags and combination moves that showcased Punk's technical prowess and Rhodes' powerhouse style. The crowd ate it up, chanting dueling chants of "Let's go Cody" and "CM Punk," until the two merged into a unified roar of support. But when the buzzer sounded and the third entrant made his way down the ramp, the momentum shifted violently. Because that third entrant removed his mask as he entered the cage, revealing himself to be Kevin Owens. The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral. This was a betrayal on par with Seth Rollins' heel turn years ago, because Owens had been one of WWE's most reliable faces, a fan favorite who seemed genetically incapable of playing villain. Yet here he was, joining Rollins' faction with a vicious pop-up powerbomb to Cody Rhodes that nearly bent the American Nightmare in half. Punk tried to intervene but got caught with a superkick from one of the still masked associates, and suddenly the numbers game had shifted dramatically. 2-on-3, with 2 more intervals to go before their side got reinforcements. The 5 minutes that followed were a masterclass in storytelling through violence. Punk and Rhodes fought like cornered animals, using every trick in their considerable arsenals just to survive. They weaponized the steel mesh, grinding faces against it, using the chain link as leverage for submission holds, turning the cage itself into a partner in their desperate resistance. The crowd was on their feet, the energy in Rogers Arena electric enough to power a small city. When the next buzzer sounded, the mystery of who would emerge to even the odds was answered in the most shocking way possible. Randy Orton, the Viper himself, appearing for the first time since his injury 8 months ago. The pop was deafening, the kind of genuine surprise reaction that you simply cannot manufacture. Orton moved through the cage like a force of nature, hitting RKOs on everyone in reach, his presence alone shifting the battle's momentum back toward equilibrium. But Rollins' team wasn't finished revealing their hand. Their next entrant was Finn Balor, and he didn't come alone. He brought a steel chair wrapped in barbed wire, a weapon so brutal that the referee could only watch in horror as it was introduced into an already savage environment. Balor worked with sadistic precision, targeting Rhodes specifically, opening up the cut above his eye that would require 17 stitches and become one of the defining images of a night.